Let's kick off this explainer by going way, way back. We are talking about a 4 billion year, incredibly epic cinematic story of survival and transformation. If you've ever stopped to wonder how on Earth we got from microscopic little specks swimming in a boiling ocean to a species capable of building skyscrapers and launching rockets into space, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to trace what is arguably the greatest story ever told, the story of human evolution.
Close your eyes for a second and just picture the very early universe. It was completely silent. No Earth, definitely no humans, just this endless expanse of darkness and energy. When our little blue planet finally did show up, billions of years ago, honestly, it was an absolute nightmare. We're talking constant volcanic eruptions, massive storms blocking out the sun, and oceans that were literally boiling under a highly toxic atmosphere. When you look at that kind of total chaos, the idea of any life surviving there seems flat out impossible. Yet, hidden inside that toxic mess, the impossible was about to happen.
So, how do you get from a lifeless, boiling rock to actually having living things? Well, about 4 billion years ago, as the Earth finally cooled down just a bit and rain fell to form the first oceans, there was this miraculous chemical reaction. Under intense heat, crazy pressure, and lightning strikes, chemicals mixed together to create the very first self-replicating molecules. Scientists call this whole process abiogenesis, basically the origin of life from non-living stuff. Now, this wasn't complex life. No brains, no eyes, no emotions, just incredibly simple, tiny microscopic organisms floating around in the ancient sea.
But here's the cool part. Those tiny little organisms didn't just stay the same. At first, they survived by eating chemicals, but over millions of years, they unlocked what is basically the biggest biological cheat code in history: photosynthesis. They actually figured out how to use sunlight to create their own energy. And as a byproduct, these single-celled organisms started pumping Earth's atmosphere full of oxygen. Without that oxygen, the complex life we see today, including us, would have absolutely zero chance of existing.
Now, for nearly 2 billion years, life stayed totally microscopic. The sheer scale of time we're dealing with here is just massive. But evolution never really stops, right? Those single cells eventually grouped up to form plants and animals, leading to this massive burst of diverse ocean life known as the Cambrian explosion. Eventually, fish evolved primitive lungs, grew stronger fins, and literally crawled out onto dry land. You get amphibians, then reptiles, and that whole progression leads us right up to a massive cataclysmic turning point about 66 million years ago.
Picture the dramatic contrast of this era, because it's wild. For over 160 million years, dinosaurs were the absolute rulers of the planet. We're talking massive, towering giants. And meanwhile, our distant ancestors, these early mammals, were just these tiny, weak little creatures, practically forced to hide in the shadows just to survive the day. But then, 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid slams into Earth. Total climate collapse. The dinosaurs get completely wiped out. But against all odds, our tiny, overlooked mammal ancestors actually survived the darkness, and for the very first time, the planet was theirs. Inheriting this post-asteroid world gave those surviving mammals the chance to rapidly evolve and branch out. Some of them moved up into the trees and became a group called primates, and they developed this incredibly specific toolkit. We're talking stronger vision with forward-facing eyes for depth perception, flexible hands that could easily grasp branches, and much larger, more socially complex brains. Every single one of these physical and behavioral adaptations became the foundational toolkit that would eventually make human evolution a reality.
Okay, real quick timeout before we keep going, because we really need to clear up one of the biggest evolutionary myths out there. You've almost certainly heard someone ask, hey, if humans evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys around? Well, as the famous science adage goes, we didn't evolve from modern monkeys. Instead, humans and modern apes just share a common ancestor that lived millions of years ago. Evolution is not some straight line marching neatly forward. It is a massive, incredibly messy, branching tree of life.
So looking at that branching tree, where does our specific path really start to separate? It happens around 6 to 7 million years ago over in Africa, when our early ancestors did something that completely changed the trajectory of history. They stood up. Walking upright on 2 legs was a total game changer. It adapted their bodies for long-distance travel, sure, but way more importantly, it freed up their hands. This meant ancestors like Australopithecus, you've probably heard of the famous fossil Lucy, could carry objects and eventually start using tools.
And those newly freed hands led right to our next massive leap, jump to about 2.4 million years ago, and we meet Homo habilis. The name literally translates to handyman. They fundamentally transformed how they survived in a really dangerous world by creating the very first stone tools. Suddenly, they could cut tough meat. They could break open bones to get at that super nutritious marrow. They were adapting in a whole new way. This is the exact moment where pure physical brawn started to take a back seat, and intelligence became humanity's primary survival advantage.
And that intelligence just kept compounding. Next up is Homo erectus. They were taller, stronger, totally built for long journeys. But their absolute superpower was controlling fire. Fire wasn't just a way to stay warm or scare off a predator, its ultimate power was cooking food. When you cook food, it releases a lot more calories and takes way less energy to digest, which scientists actually believe is a huge reason why human brains were able to grow even larger. Fueled by that extra energy, Homo erectus became the very first human species to migrate out of Africa.
As our ancestors spread out across the globe, brain power kept skyrocketing. We developed complex language, advanced planning, and long-term memory. Unlike other animals, humans could now teach life-saving knowledge to the next generation. And hey, we weren't the only smart ones around. Neanderthals, living up in freezing European climates, were incredibly intelligent too. They made tools, used fire, buried their dead, and likely even created early art and music. For thousands of years, we shared the Earth with them, proving that advanced intelligence was becoming the defining trait of our evolutionary family.
Then, roughly 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens step onto the stage. That's us. Emerging in Africa, we brought some seriously extraordinary upgrades. We started painting cave walls, forming highly complex social networks, and thinking symbolically. But honestly, our absolute greatest weapon was pure imagination and storytelling. We could talk about and organize around concepts that didn't even physically exist yet. That level of advanced, large-scale cooperation became our ultimate edge, completely setting us apart from every other creature on Earth.
Armed with stone tools, fire, and that unparalleled ability to cooperate, Homo sapiens pulled off an unprecedented global migration. Our ancestors walked across blazing deserts, they survived freezing ice ages, and they built boats to cross vast unknown oceans. From Africa, they expanded into Europe, Asia, Australia, and the Americas. Human beings successfully figured out how to adapt to literally every single environment this planet has to offer. No other species in the history of Earth had ever achieved that kind of global dominance.
Now, for tens of thousands of years, we were hunter-gatherers, constantly on the move. But about 10,000 years ago, everything shifted monumentally with the agricultural revolution. By learning how to farm, humans could finally settle down permanently in one place, and this sparked a massive chain reaction. Settling meant we could store extra food. Extra food meant our populations could explode, and growing populations built the very first villages. Those villages eventually evolved into cities. This was the definitive birth of human society.
Once we didn't have to spend every waking second worrying about finding our next meal, human ingenuity just snowballed. We saw massive civilizations pop up in Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and China. We invented writing to actually record our history, math to measure the world around us, complex laws to govern huge groups of people, and monumental architecture to show off our power. Yes, wars reshaped borders and kingdoms rose and fell, but the overall pace of human advancement was just accelerating at a wild speed. For thousands of years, agricultural life hummed along, changing, but relatively slowly. And then, the Industrial Revolution hits. Human progress practically explodes overnight. We completely ditch relying solely on manual labor and animal power. Suddenly, we've got machines, sprawling factories, the massive power of the steam engine, and the glow of electricity. Science and technology started totally reshaping the entire globe, moving faster than anyone could have ever possibly dreamed.
And that massive industrial explosion, that paved the direct path to the world you and I are living in right now, the digital age. Computers have connected the entire globe. The internet completely revolutionized how we talk and share information. And now we're watching the emergence of artificial intelligence. Think about that for a second. For the very first time in our 4 billion year story, humans have actually built machines that are capable of learning. Technology has effectively become humanity's newest and arguably most potent evolutionary force.
Which brings us to this really staggering pause. Just look at how far we've actually come. We started as a microscopic single cell floating in a toxic, boiling ocean. And now? We are a species that builds towering skyscrapers and splits the atom. So what exactly does the unwritten future hold? Are we going to colonize other planets and become a multi-planetary species? Will we genetically modify our own biology to live longer? Or will we physically merge with the artificial intelligence we're building right now?
When you step back, you're left with this profound realization. Every single person alive right now is carrying the legacy of billions of years of fierce, against all odds survival and adaptation. But here is the crazy part.
For the very first time in the history of life on Earth, humanity itself might actually be in control of its own evolution. Getting here from a single cell was incredibly hard-fought, but this next chapter, that is entirely up to us. So the real question is, are we ready for the responsibility of designing our own future? Thanks so much for taking this epic ride with me today. Keep learning and stay curious.